Okay, I think we can see people joining us. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to just give a minute or two for people to join us, and then we'll make a start. Okay, so I'm conscious we've only got half an hour. As the session is being recorded, let's make a start, if that's okay with you, Becca.
Yeah, certainly. Let's go for it.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our monthly webinar series. And this month, our topic is fixing inequalities fast in recruitment using recruitment technology. I probably didn't need to say recruitment again, but hopefully you got the gist. So every month, as you're aware, those of you who have attended our webinars before, you'll know that we focus on topics related to talent acquisition and development, and we invite guest speakers every month. Today, I'm very pleased to say that we've got Becca from AssessFirst to take us through the very important topic related to diversity and inclusion in recruitment. So before I properly introduce her to you, just would like to go through a couple of housekeeping points. The session is being recorded, as you know, and we'll share the slides with you and the recording. So don't worry about making notes. Just sit back and enjoy listening to Becca, and please do, we encourage you to contribute as well into the discussion by asking questions or sharing your thoughts and insights. So please use Q&A function you see on the screen as opposed to chat function. So we have just one place to monitor the questions. And the session will last for 30 minutes. And if we are unable to answer any questions, we'll follow up later on as well. So I'm just going to now introduce our guest speaker, Becca. Becca is a global sales account director at AssessFirst, and before joining AssessFirst, she has worked in recruitment and HR, so she has been close to the ground and understands the challenges, day-to-day challenges and priorities for HR and recruitment professionals. And also understands the importance of reducing biases in the recruitment. So she is very well placed to talk to us about this case study that or the work that AssessFirst has done with the recruitment firm Spencer Ogden. So without further ado, Becca, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Renu. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time. Today, I just wanted to share with you the story of Spencer Ogden, pioneering recruitment company, in their project so far with us at AssessFirst. They've been looking specifically at diversity and looking to fix inequality within their recruitment process. Before that, I just wanted to talk about why it's important as well to put data at the core of our people decisions, despite some possible pushback from maybe senior up in the ranks. Let me just quickly before that, well, I guess, Renu, you've just introduced me. My name, if my computer wants to work. What's going on? Give me a moment. There you go. So I'm Becca. As Renu mentioned, I work at AssessFirst on the Anglophone market. For those of you who don't know, what we do here at AssessFirst is basically on a daily basis, we look to help companies make better talent decisions, whether that be in the context of hiring people, developing them, identifying the leaders of tomorrow, or looking to achieve high performance within existing teams. We touch pretty much every stage of the talent life cycle. We do that by helping to identify out of all of those candidates and employees who apply to a specific role, who are going to be the ones who are most likely to perform at the highest of levels, whilst remaining fully engaged in the job, whilst enjoying their everyday role. Now, before I talk about the specific use case at Spencer Ogden, I wanted to just touch upon the general situation that exists with businesses today when looking at their recruitment process and their selection of people. Hiring is broken. Now, not only is it, or could it be considered as being ineffective, but more importantly, quite unfair. And if you need convincing of that, we just need to take a look at the survival rates that exist today after certain points in the timeline, post onboarding, post recruiting of someone. And so we've done exactly that. And we've followed thousands of people. And what we saw was that after a period of 6 months following their start date, 22% of those people who started on day one were no longer with the business. That could have been a decision either made by them or their employees. Moving forward to 12 months after that start date, that figure of people out of the job increases to 36%. And move forward again another 6 months to a year and a half, almost 1 out of 2 of those people who started on day one are no longer with the business. And so I guess the question is, why are there so many hiring failures? 9 times out of 10, it's not because these individuals can't do the role. It's quite simply because they don't want to be there. It's due to misalignments in their behavioural aspects. Maybe they don't get on with their manager. Maybe they don't feel part of the culture. Maybe what they do on a day-to-day basis just quite simply isn't what they want to be doing. And then we look at people still in the job. So looking at that 54% who after 18 months are still with the business, what are we looking at in terms of level of engagement? And this is actually relatively shocking. To sum it up, we've got 36% who are engaged. Great. Okay, so 36%, that 54% who are with the business are happy to be there. 51% who are disengaged and 13% who are actively disengaged. That basically means that they don't care if people around them know that they just don't want to be there. So there's 2 things that we can take away from this study. The first is 81%, so the vast majority of hirings lead to failures. And the second, most of these failures are behavior related. So we're looking at 89%, nearly 90%. And so something clearly isn't working. And in an attempt to understand that, we can ask the question, well, hang on a second, why is it so hard to spot the right talents who will inevitably or eventually be happy within the role? Why is it so hard to understand who would be a right fit within your specific business? And so how does it work in practice in general? Well, you will have somebody applying for a specific role. You will have a selection of CVs, a pool of applicants who you will then possibly pre-select based upon something such as their previous experiences or their academic experience or criteria. From that, you will draw a long list of candidates that you will possibly shortlist again through a selection of made from multiple rounds of interviews, possibly hard, possibly soft skill assessments. You will then have a short list of candidates until you reach that hired individual. That's all well and good. But the problem is that at every stage in that process, the tools that people are going to use to make those decisions is going to be their brains, which, okay, fantastic, magnificent tool, but it's never been designed to handle so much data, so much complexity. And so as a result, people are going to automatically activate what we call cognitive bias. Now, there are over 180 cognitive biases that exist, and that can essentially affect the way in which we analyze information and ultimately make our decisions, not just, talking about decisions regarding recruitment, but general everyday decisions. And so what automatically becomes apparent is that those decisions that recruiters will make will automatically and subconsciously be unfair and not necessarily as optimal as they could be. That decision is then detrimental to people and unfair because it's a criteria that has no link to performance, no link to engagement of somebody, can be detrimental to businesses and their bottom line, but also detrimental to obviously the candidate and the individual applying. There are also other factors that we need to take into account. The world is changing at an unprecedented pace. I mean, we've all seen it in the last 18 months, 2 years. Tasks are becoming more and more automated, unpredictable, natural catastrophes can happen. And so it's really, really complicated to actually predict which competencies will be crucial. What is it that we actually need from the people that we want to hire? And so we feel that we need to bet on the people who will be able to learn those competencies along the way as industries, as global focuses change and adapt in the future. We need to detect the potential far beyond past experiences. And in essence, we need to look at hiring for the future, not just for now. How can we make it more efficient? Well, it's not necessarily rocket science. We feel that you just need to focus on who people truly are, above and beyond their CV, above and beyond any previous experiences that they may well have and everything else that is listed on their CV. Now, quite simply, by hiring in a data-driven way and looking at who people truly are, what truly motivates them, and their potential to adapt for any future changes, mean that you can bring more equality into the hiring process by moving away from just assessing candidates based upon their previous experience and other unfair factors, because data at the end of the day is not affected by gender, it's not affected by ethnicity, by sex, by age, and everything else. There is zero adverse impact because this data-driven tech, this data-driven approach is based on criteria which is not subject to classical bias, that subconscious bias that we spoke about before. And so to demonstrate that, I'm going to quickly run through some defining factors of individuals that may well currently be a consideration in recruitment and hiring choices. And we're going to see if there is a big difference when it comes to their personality, their ability, and ultimately their performance. So let's take the example of men and women. What we've looked at is their results obtained on personality questionnaires. What you can see at the bottom here is all of the different traits that have been measured, the 1 to 20, and then you can see the women's scoring in blue and the men's scoring in green. And actually, I mean, the scorings are in between pretty much 5 and 6. So you can see that when it comes to personality, there isn't that much difference between men and women. Let's now take the example of age. So what we've looked at here is people under 35 and over 35. Again, you can see those in under 35 highlighted in blue. And if you kind of squint, you can see those over 35 scoring for those personality traits in green. And you have to zoom right in to actually see a difference. Again, emphasizing that there isn't that much difference when it comes to age and personality, and therefore capability around that subject. And for education, so again, we've looked at different levels of education and the scoring. Now you can see that this is slightly more varied in terms of it sits just below 5, between just below 5 and 6. But again, not a massive crucial difference between those who have a doctorate and those who have no education at all. And then finally, we're going to look, interestingly so, at those from low-income neighbourhoods and a more kind of global neighbourhood. And what we've got in blue here is Mosaic Study. Versus our sample. And again, there's absolutely nothing in terms of difference between the two scorings across the 20 different personality traits. And so in the end, these factors could be considered as not even varying the outcome. But we find ourselves naturally adopting a recruitment process that essentially has one or more of these factors at the heart of it. Whether it's conscious or not, more than likely is going to be there. And so if we want to make better hiring decisions and make the world a more inclusive and more fair place, we need to switch from an intuitive approach to a much more data-driven approach. And importantly so, we need to select the data we use and be careful with that, because we need to make sure that we're not reusing data in a way that kind of makes the problems and the challenges that we already have around bias even greater. And so on that note, I wanted to talk about our case study with Spencer Ogden and discuss how the team at Spencer have switched their approach from an intuitive approach whereby their recruiters went a little bit on gut feeling to a much more data-driven approach in an incredibly impressive 8 months, and share with you some of the results that they managed to achieve. So firstly, I guess for those who don't know Spencer Ogden, they are a recruitment specialist in the energy and infrastructure market, and their mission is to create careers to power a sustainable future. So very much in the forward-thinking mode when it comes to the recruitment market. They currently have over 500 team members scattered across, I think it's up to 12 different locations now. And typically, the way in which they have been able to grow over those last 10 years, so scaling relatively quickly, is due to organic growth. So their model is to bring in trainee talent, local graduate talent, onto essentially a graduate scheme and train them up in almost a kind of sales recruitment boot camp, and move them through the ranks relatively quickly. So about 70% of Spencer Ogden's management leadership team came via that particular graduate route. Now, they have very ambitious headcount plans, approximately 20% increase year on year across the next 3 years. So it's not just necessarily for the year, but this is very much a kind of long-term vision in a relatively challenging market. Their 3-year plan was focused not just on headcount growth, but also the diversity and inclusion around that. Particularly in the UK, there was seen to be minimal amount of diversity. You know, managers were kind of renowned for hiring within their image, hiring who they, you know, may want to go for a drink with, go for a meal with, someone who they maybe reminded them of themselves, who they thought that they could really get on well with outside of work. The other thing was that they were really needed to look at whilst they were growing was ultimately looking at operating costs as well, because they didn't want to keep those increasing. They wanted to somehow kind of decrease the amount in those operating costs. And so Spencer Ogden wanted to make sure that the talent consultants that they had were as productive as possible, whilst, as I mentioned, going through this diversity journey and reducing this element of unconscious bias that, to be fair to them, they knew was going on, and they really wanted to sort it out. And so what they wanted to do was ultimately define within Spencer Ogden, what does a good recruiter look like? And this was something that they were anticipating to be quite unique. They found that there might possibly, or they thought there might possibly be fundamental traits of a kind of a general recruiter with someone who worked with Spencer Ogden, as with every kind of recruitment company. But you know, there was still some sort of vavavoom that they felt that they had within the business that really really was highlighted in their culture. Now, lots of the managers had assumptions as to what made somebody good, which kind of couples with this whole unconscious bias fact. And Donna, Chief People Officer, really wanted to challenge those assumptions and to turn around and say, do you know what, that's obviously each and every single one of your opinions, but what personality and importantly, what motivations can be attributed to success in a data-driven way. And I think anyone who knows, I don't know if there's anyone on the webinar who's kind of within the recruitment industry, within the recruitment sales industry particularly, but the recruitment sales role, I guess, isn't necessarily something that is really, really difficult. it's not got a technical aspect to it, but if you don't enjoy it, if it doesn't motivate you, then somebody won't do really, really well at it, and they won't necessarily be successful. And so Donna and Spencer Ogden knew this, that element of motivation, that element of personality was the key to determining what that kind of good looks like. And so that's why it was particularly tough and kind of really, really required for them to test this personality and motivational aspect. Now, another challenge that Spencer Ogden had also is that they wanted to move away from the CV. Most of the candidates had just come out of education, might have worked in a coffee shop, but at the end of the day, the CV at that level, graduate level, didn't give them much about that individual. And also, CV equals judgment. You look at it, you make a judgment straight away. And this is what Spencer Ogden wanted to move away from. And so they wanted to challenge what they thought was a good recruiter and find some data ultimately that proved that theory. Now, in terms of results, what have they seen so far? And this is probably sitting now at 9 or 10 months of full use. So I believe that their results have got slightly even better. They've surveyed 70 of their existing sales team members to create a predictive model to identify that what good looks like as part of our tool, as part of using the artificial intelligence that we offer. They've administered 5,000 tests to date, made 180 hires in H1, so half one, Jan through to June. And what was really, really great, and I know that's something that they're specifically proud of, is they saw an increase in diverse hires of 22%. Which is fantastic. And that's something that I remember speaking with Donna about, that she specifically said that it's something that you could see and feel in the office. Now that everyone is also back to the office, it was really exciting for the team, and obviously equally for us here at AssessFirst. Why is that? Well, all of those results are achieved because they're looking at the potential of individuals, the potential of candidates applying, not necessarily what they can offer today, but if they were giving that, 3-6 months training, what could they be? As mentioned previously, Donna didn't want her talent team to have to grow exponentially in order to make all of these hires. They wanted to ultimately keep the same amount of talent consultants, which is exactly what they were able to do, and achieve 30% more hires. So they've got a reduction in talent manpower, an increased speed in success, and also a reduction time in the time to bill for that first bill to come through, which is fantastic. Not only that, but also finally for the talent team, they actually rolled a comparison to 2019, and we can see the improvement when looking at the stats in terms of that each stage in the process and the improvement that they've seen on all of those. And the most interesting stat here is the talent to submission rate, which is saying that in 2019, Spencer was spending essentially too much wasted time on the wrong talent. And because they're now really honing in on those applicants at the initial stage in the process, identifying ultimately if they even have a culture fit to the business before essentially they're interviewing them, they're saving a lot of time and really making sure that they're seeing the right kind of talent when it comes to face-to-face interviews. And so the next steps for Spencer Ogden in particular, ideally, and this may sound, I don't know, impossible or controversial, but they actually want to get completely rid of the CV. They'll need some form of a profile, obviously, but they feel that they can work with their managers now in a space that they don't need a CV to make a decision on somebody. And that inevitably will make sure that there's a minimal amount of judgment, as to maybe what university somebody's gone to, where they live, and those sorts of aspects. So that's how Spencer Ogden got on with the tool. If you want to find out a little bit more about how we played a part in their evolving recruitment process and their increase in diversity that they focused on, Spencer Ogden, please do not hesitate to ask any questions. I can't see the chat, so I'm not entirely sure if there are any questions. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Becca. Thanks for taking us through. It's a very interesting case study and quite relevant to many of the challenges we face from day to day, not just in the recruitment industry alone, but other sectors as well, isn't it? So I have a couple of questions you might be able to answer. In terms of the results Spencer Ogden achieved in 8 months, how did they achieve those results so quickly?
Good question. First off, for them, it was something that internally was really urgent for them, because like I mentioned, they'd already kind of very much established that their hiring managers were potentially being quite quite biased in their choices, and so they really drove it from their side. But also in terms of the tool and how it works, it's really quick to get up and running. In terms of creating that predictive model I mentioned, I think that they sample size a certain sector of their team, that takes 2 weeks, and because of that and the efficiencies that they gained, they were able to actually cut steps out of their recruitment process. So what they were finding is they were hiring people a lot quicker, hence they're a lot more able to achieve those results in that length of time. But they've by no means finished. They haven't reached where they want to get to, but it's still kind of a good start, I guess. Oh, Renu, I think.
Sorry. Oh, this is not the first time I've done, but yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So, in terms of the results that you mentioned, is there a report that's accessible? There's a question, and is it published and accessible somewhere to share?
In terms of
the report that Spencer Ogden published or AssessFirst published.
Yeah. I can send that around, certainly. Yep, most definitely. I can send that around so that everyone's got a copy of that on kind of more details as well. And equally, if anyone actually wants to speak to Donna, she will be happy to speak with anyone and kind of share how she did it from her opinion.
Okay, no, great. So thank you for offering to do that. And there's another question in the Q&A in terms of, you mentioned that this model was kind of used for the recruitment of recruiters. So is that, do you see that process working for a certain level of seniority, or just for more sort of less experienced junior kind of positions?
Yeah. Good question. So with Spencer, we're just using it at the moment for graduate roles. And it lends itself well because what we assess is personality, motivation, mental agility, again, all providing you with information on a graduate whose CV is probably going to be relatively bare in terms of experience. But I mean, we have also the majority of our clients, as an example, who use it right at the latter end of the process for more senior roles. So there's certain functionalities and reporting suite that we offer that lends itself to providing information to ensure that you can question in on those kind of senior roles. So because we assess personality, motivation, mental agility, those aspects aren't attributed to a certain industry. They're not kind of associated with a certain level of hierarchy. So it's very much associated with the individual, meaning that it can be used for any role, any industry.
No, thank you for that. That's a great insight. And it's also a journey for organizations, isn't it? When we have always been used to kind of assess candidates based on past behavior predicts future performance. So this is just a transformation in the process, isn't it? And just challenging how we have been doing things for quite a few years. Great. Thank you for taking us through. Just conscious of time, if you have any questions, please feel free to speak. I'm more than happy to unmute. But if Becca, is there anything you wanted to cover? Were you offering a trial for any of our attendees today?
So
get a good feel for the test.
Yeah,
Or is it-
certainly. If you get, I don't know how it would work, but certainly if you can reach out to me or reach out to Renu, and you can have a go at the assessments and see what they're like from a candidate experience point of view, but also from a user perspective in terms of the information that we provide back. I'd be very happy to do that, no problem. If you are interested, what I'll also do is I'll forward on that more information with regards to this case study, and we've also recently just launched a D&I white paper, which I can send across as well for anyone who is interested.
Oh, great. Thank you for the offer. And we have one last question, if that's okay with you. And part of it is probably quicker to answer, but if you need time, we can follow up. Do you have a psychometric test available in English or any different languages? And how do you ensure the fairness and validity of the translated test?
Good question. So yeah, the tool, therefore the assessment, but also the user access, the kind of back office access is available in 15 languages. So most European languages, simplified Chinese, a couple of others. And in terms of how we adapt that culturally, everything is adapted culturally. And it's quite simply because the sample sets are based on a local population. So that's all kind of accounted for within that to ensure that ultimately it's valid.
Oh, great. Thank you, Becca. It's important, isn't it? Because if you look at the cultural biases we have as well, it's different in different contexts, isn't it? Even if when it comes to communication, like if you look at the South Asian population, if a woman spoke in public, it may not be seen as a strength. But it's different in different contexts. So it's important that these tests are adapted. So thank you for taking us through. There is further information available on the Talent Grader website on what AssessFirst do and about their assessment as well. Please feel free to have a look at that. But as Becca said, we will be sharing the report with you and the recording and the slides as well. So thank you so much for being with us here. And thanks, Becca, for taking time to present this.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. I'm just going to pause the